Hello, creative spirits. Welcome back to your creative and magical life. This episode, I'm with a very special guest, Arianna Smith, who actually graciously, wonderfully recorded an episode with me months ago that somehow the internet or technology misplaced, or rather, I feel like I didn't throw it away. I don't know where it went, but I couldn't find it. And Ariana agreed to come back on this show to take another try. I think maybe it all worked out as it should. Maybe the universe wanted us to wait a while, but nevertheless, Ariana's been very patient and gracious and is here again to have a lovely conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about Ariana's work as a therapist who utilizes tarot and spiritual awareness um, in her practice. And also, we'll get into some kind of like tarot uh, nuts and bolts sort of things, some like aspects of tarot that probably come up in a practice, like is tarot predictive or not? Do we want to use it in a predictive way or not? We're going to talk a little bit about coming out of the broom closet or just owning one's witchy identity. And then we'll also talk a little bit about timing and tarot, because humans are very time focused, but
Mhm.
tarot's not so much. Anyway, hello, Ariana. Thank you for coming back on the
Uh,
show. How are you today? How are you arriving?
I am so delighted to be here, and I think we are both arriving here just as we are, and grateful to be back because I feel like the conversation, especially around the broom closet, is going to be much deeper than the first time around. So we're getting like act three of that as opposed to act two.
Cool. Wonderful. I'm excited to hear about that. Let me tell folks a little bit more about you, and then you can tell us even more about you after that. So Ariana Smith is a licensed therapist, a copywriter, and intuitive tarot reader who helps therapists, spiritual seekers, and healers tap into their intuition and reclaim their power. She weaves together EMDR therapy, internal family systems, and intuitive practices like tarot, human design, and seasonal rituals to support mental health, spiritual growth, and aligned entrepreneurship. As a copywriter, Ariana empowers therapists and healers to create authentic, purpose-driven content that deeply resonates with their audience. As a queer, witchy, neurodivergent soul, she dreams of owning a cozy bookstore by the ocean, surrounded by cats and senior dogs. Please give me a job there when your dream is realized. That's
It's
uh
going to be a co-op, right? It's going to
great.
be
Put me
a
on the waiting
co-op.
list. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to audition. Well, tell us a little bit about what your work is looking or feeling like right
hmm
now.
hmm
Um, yeah, anything you want to add to that that would be good for us to understand?
Hmm. I think that bio really captured me pretty well. And I think worth noting is I've been practicing maybe a little bit around my tarot journey. I've been practicing tarot personally for a long time, probably like, I guess like 15 years personally. And just through the urging, and I never thought I would become a professional tarot reader. But just through the urging of two close witchy friends, we're like, I think you need to offer this to other people. So that's been a recent, in the past year, recent development in my spiritual journey is being more open and being more yeah, being more available for that and being more vulnerable to people's thoughts around that as well.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you found tarot, how it came into your
hmm
life.
hmm
How did it start for you?
mm So there's like two versions. There's like the adult version and then the like later version when I realized more about the history of tarot. So So my first exposure to tarot was actually through my therapist, and it was oracle cards that she used. So back in my 20s. And then there was something so powerful as I'm such a visual person and such a just someone that sometimes things can't be expressed through words, that having oracle cards, having tarot just really helped me feel seen and tap into aspects of my experience and my struggles at the time that couldn't be accessed through words. And, back when I was in therapy in my 20s, like trauma wasn't a thing. Like people didn't understand like somatic practices, like everything was behavioral, everything was in your head. So tarot felt like a way to access more of my body and my intuition and wisdom than I'd ever been able to before. And then over time, I just connected with more and more people that wanted to practice and then started studying, taking courses, and then also listening to podcasts. And then, as I was learning more about the history of tarot, actually starting as a card game, I was transported back to my grandma's kitchen, where her and her sisters would read tarot, but it wasn't called tarot; it was just cards. They're like, "Can we read your cards?" And they had this piece of paper like that I still remember that had the meanings of all of it, and they just used a normal card deck to read cards. And like looking back now, I can be like, oh, this was definitely a like card-based practice. And I thought it was so cool. And it was just something my grandma was doing in the kitchen and like something we did, like the adults did. Kids didn't get their cards read, the adults did. So I think the seed was even planted sooner than as an adult around like, oh, like these cards can give you information that might not come in other means.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting that it was a therapist who brought
Yeah.
card. I mean, well, really, it was your grandmother. Um, yeah, and I think it's so interesting readers who use playing cards, which of course don't have that visual
Mhm,
connection that you're talking about, which I
mhm,
also experienced pretty profoundly when I first started using a deck, like as someone who is really interested in stories and storytelling
mhm,
and storycraft. There is this embodied or visceral feeling from
mhm,
encountering just the visual, like it hits not quite in your brain, but somewhere else that's really
mhm,
refreshing, really
mhm.
deep. So that's very cool. You have both kind of card pasts, card
Yeah.
lineages converging
Yeah.
in your practice or in your journey. And so now you do use tarot with
Mhm,
therapy, I mean, with many kinds of clients,
mhm,
it sounds like. So tell us a little bit what that could look like maybe in the therapy space. And I'm
mhm.
also curious, sorry, this is a double whammy
I love it.
question, but how you decided to bring tarot. I mean, it makes sense since you saw it in a therapy space in the first place,
Yeah.
but how did you make that decision and what does that look like in your practice?
Um, okay, which question? Maybe I'll just start more broadly around how just bringing more of a spiritual leaning came into my practice. And it actually came through a tarot reading, of course. I was reading cards for myself. I think this was maybe like 2022, 23. I was reading cards for myself and I kept getting the Seven of Swords, like kept getting it. And I did not understand. I was like, you know, and we can side quest into traditional meanings and fear-based meanings versus other things, but I was like, no one's deceiving me. Like, am I deceiving myself? Like, what's happening here? And so then I got a reading from a really trusted teacher, and the Seven of Swords came up, and she basically reflected back that I felt like I was, my spirit, like my spiritual practice was becoming so strong and growing so much that it felt like I was cheating on my therapy practice with my spiritual practice.
Mhm.
And so that was like a real call that I needed to integrate the two. I couldn't keep those two separate anymore. And so As a copywriter, I like one day I remember I was just like, I'm just gonna rewrite my homepage and I'm gonna be a therapist for like witchy folks and for spiritual seekers. And I'm going to call in folks that, they are looking for clinical mental health support, but they're also looking for a place that their tarot practice or their spiritual practice isn't going to be seen as weird. And so kind of, I'm a Gemini, and a double Gemini. So I'm always feel like I'm just riding the duality of like two worlds. And so that was like the first shift. And then from there, deciding how to use it. I mean, like the possibilities are limitless around how to use
Sure.
tarot in session. When I decided to become an intuitive tarot reader, I wanted to be really clear, and I'll try not to get too in the weeds about this, but as a therapist, we have a code of ethics, and one of those is around dual relationships. And so I had to be really clear that I wasn't folks' tarot reader. Like as a therapist, I can't be someone's tarot reader and their therapist. And so I had to solidify my code of ethics as a tarot reader to say, if you're a past or a current client, I can't read tarot for you. And that's not something that I think many tarot readers have to navigate. They're like, I can read for you, I can read for you. But with being a licensed therapist, you have to navigate that, licensing requirements and all of that. And so then for some folks, I mean, I really was guided with what their practice looked like first, and what would be most helpful for them. Um, and so for some, that was pulling a card at the end to kind of integrate the message. For others, it was using tarot to map out different parts and to like kind of like what you were talking about of like there's something like we can talk about a part of us, but then when we like choose something visual to represent us or to communicate with us, and then even I started creating tarot spreads, IFS informed tarot spreads to help connect deeper with parts and protectors, to like just deeper access that. And then other ways that I incorporated spiritual components. Some of my clients were really big into astrology. And so we talk about the transits that were impacting their life and how that correlated to what was going on with them mental health wise or family wise. I love human design. I know it's one of those things that people are either like super nerdy about or have nothing, like don't know anything about it. Are you a human design person or do you know anything about it?
I know, I feel like I'm a little bit of an in-between person,
Okay.
like because I'm just around a lot of spiritual people, then,
Mhm.
you're exposed more to human design. And
Yeah.
I've had a reading done. I'm a projector, a splenic projector. And so, but it's hard for me to, yeah, I keep looking back at the reading to try to get more things, but I also bang my head against this like thing they tell projectors, which is to wait for the invitation, which is something that I kind of do, especially in like personal relationships, but it's
hmm
much harder running a business. I'm like, I can't just sit
hmm
here and wait for someone to reach out. So, yeah, anyway, I'm kind of
It
into
is,
it.
the application is kind of tricky for sure, but it is something for whatever reason that I've really latched onto, and I do apply it with my therapy clients because what I do feel like human design is helpful for is it gives you a tool for how I do feel like it gives one guidance for people to access their intuition, which in human design is their authority.
Mm.
Um, and I also feel like that it offers one framework to move your energy through the world and like know how your energy might operate in the world. And so I often in my tarot readings, I'm like, I like to know people's human design because it will impact that. And then therapy clients, it's a little less common for me. I don't really know their date of birth, but I can usually guess what it is. Not guess their date of birth, but I can usually guess their human design over time. So I just
Mm.
started to slowly. So I guess the way to describe it is, there's like implicit and explicit ways that I'm integrating it. So implicitly, I might be like thinking more about what's happening for them and applying that and experimenting that. And then explicitly is more of the practice that I'm doing with them. And it's really different from therapist to therapist.
Like client to client
Yes, and
or
yes,
therapy?
and therapist to therapist. Like, so
Okay.
how I, um, like how I integrate spiritual practices into therapy is going to be really different from one therapy to the next because there's no, it's not like EMDR that has like a set protocol,
Right.
or like IFS that has a really clear framework. It really depends. And some people use energy-based approaches. Like, so I just actually got to write copy for a client who was a therapist, a trauma therapist, and Reiki, offered Reiki. And so the way she integrates it is going to be really different than me integrating IFS and tarot. So there's infinite possibilities around how, and that means infinite choices for clients too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. And it seems really important, especially as more and more people, probably particularly women or femmes or queer folk, are finding and constructing and connecting with a spiritual sensibility that's blended, that's
Mhm.
outside of or
Yes.
largely outside of like religious institutions. But
Mhm.
and spirituality is basically like how you see yourself and how you take
Yep.
meaning from life and how
Yep.
you make sense of the world. So if you have something that's kind of eclectic and you go to what I don't know, like I'm just thinking of like some regular therapist dude,
Yeah.
somewhere that like you may never bring these things into the room if you get the sense that this therapist
Yes.
isn't receptive to it, or possibly worse, you make that
Bias.
attempt, yeah, but the therapist isn't really receptive or doesn't know what to do with that, or even worse, like calls it some kind of crutch or some kind of projection or some kind of like psychological like
Hmm.
ill rather than like the truly nourishing thing that it is. So it just seems really
Yeah.
wonderful and valuable to have therapists like you.
Yeah.
Do you find that folks are like, oh my God, thank God there's like a therapist
You
like
know,
this, or I've been looking, or
yeah, yeah, I do get that. I do get emails that like I was searching witchy therapist in Denver and you popped up and I didn't even know that they existed. And there's actually, I think what you're highlighting is um, I think it really pays, even if your therapist never ever uses tarot in session, I think it really pays to have a therapist who does have that clinical mindset to feel out like, okay, how is tarot actually helping for them right now? Tarot and case. And also, if they're not neurodivergent informed, they might not understand that there's also an aspect of maybe it's a special interest that's regulating for them and a spiritual practice. And I think a lot of when I'm talking to people about tarot specifically, there's a lot of people that have left like organized religion and they have to work through their own internal bias of being told it was like the devil's work and it was evil and it was wrong. And so for those therapists, there's a little bit of I can't speak for them because I wasn't raised in organized religion, but just hearing anecdotally that it can be tricky to engage with these, more seasonal witchy practices when you also have this upbringing that told you it was wrong.
yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yes. I think there's probably a lot of religious like that's part of the healing journey for
Yes.
many people as
Yes.
they shift to other
Mhm.
spiritualities. And but also something really beautiful can happen where like, this eclectic spirituality, as I'm calling it, also allows you to bring in some of the aspects of a religious faith that are still
Mhm.
important to you, whether it's like working
Yes.
with saints or working with Mary or working with the rosary or
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious. I've put something on my blog about how to explore bringing tarot into your work with your therapist,
Hmm.
like when you're the client. And I'm curious what you might recommend to people who already have a therapist but haven't come out
Hmm.
to the therapist, which there's no obligation to do, but haven't like brought forward
Yeah.
that aspect, or they know that tarot, for example, is helpful to them, and like they're sitting having this conversation with a therapist, and part of them is like, it would be really interesting to pull a card right now, but
Hmm.
yeah, what would you
Mm.
recommend for such people
Yes. Well, my brain
beyond?
is going in like three different directions around
Okay,
this.
yeah,
So
there's a
let me
million
just
options.
see. Yeah, let me just see if I can talk to it. So I think of one direction, I'm like, in my case, right? If I had a client that's like, hey, I'm interested in tarot, and before I had come out of the broom closet, they're like, hey, I'm interested in tarot, I would like jump for joy. I'd be like, awesome, I've been practicing tarot for like 15 years. I just don't have it on my website because it's like kind of this weird thing. Let's do it. So that's one thought, is that your therapist may be low-key witchy and just not have it on their website because of just the stigma, just because maybe if they're in a group practice that's not allowed. There's this real bullshit around just like how you reveal your spiritual side as a therapist. And like no one questions
Mm,
it if it's like one of the organized religions, but when it comes to anything besides that, you can seem as less professional. So that's one offshoot, is it's very possible your therapist might be like, oh my gosh, yes, let's do it. The other thing is that, you know, there is ways to, and I might be overcomplicating this, but I'm thinking if you want someone who's just going to pull cards with you and just like talk about cards with you versus someone who's clinically trained to apply tarot and symbology and those practices. So if you want to integrate tarot, you might ask, like, what's your training around this? Because, yeah, if you want to fuck around with cards with your therapist, do it. If you want them to apply, like before we got on, I told you I attended a training it was called Mapping Legacy, and it was about applying IFS and tarot and ancestral healing, right? So your therapist may not be trained, but maybe they'd be interested in taking some trainings and have some type of clinical approach that they're going to take to it. And then the third thing that's coming to my mind is I think you also have to sit with, how tender is this topic to you? And if they rejected that, if they said no, how would you navigate that? Right? So, how can you bring it up? In my case, let's say I brought it up to my therapist. Um, and I was just like, "Hey, can we like play with tarot sometime?" And they said something like diminutive. With how deeply that's ingrained into my practice, it would rupture the relationship because I'd be like, "Oh, I can't trust this." So that's not to say folks shouldn't bring it up, but I think that they might need to evaluate, how important is this practice to me? Like, how important is this to me? And if they respond negatively, do I have enough trust with them to repair the relationship? So, like that, like with my therapist, if I brought this up and maybe she replied in a negative or dismissive way, do I have enough trust with her to be like, actually, that really hurt? Can I tell you how important this is to me? And hands down, if they're a good therapist, they will be like, I'm so sorry. Like, tell me more about this. I did not realize this. So, those are the three different branches that come to mind around this topic.
yeah, yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I'm thinking about how it worked for me. And at first, like, I think it started in a group therapy that I
Hmm.
attended weekly for like 3 years. And that was a space where, I was practicing like articulating and
Hmm.
identifying as more parts of myself. So in those conversations with the group, sometimes like a tarot card would come to mind and I might like bring it up or describe it. And over time, with little things like that, more members of the group, not everyone, but more members would sort of like ask more about it. And one of the therapists in particular who I worked with one on one for like when I was
Hmm.
going through a breakup, so she had already sort of seen me in possession of that practice. And so then when we were working one on one, which did include a little bit of parts work, I can't remember if I think she suggested it. She was sort of like, why don't you pull a card and see, if there's like an energy that would be helpful? And I pulled the King of Wands, and it was this
Hmm.
breakup where I was wanting to shift and conclude the relationship that we had, but my partner was a bit more resistant. So it was just a lot of like struggle to navigate that. And the King of
Hmm.
Wands, the therapist sort of like, okay, the King of Wands can kind of be in your back pocket. And we talked about like the power of that card and
Hmm.
um yeah, the self-ownership of that card, which was giving me a little more permission and courage to say
Hmm.
things I knew my partner didn't want to hear, but were
Hmm.
honest.
Yep.
So, um, yeah, I really like that advice. There's ways to kind of like drop it into the conversation and sort of see what reaction you get, if there's curiosity or if there's a
Hmm.
kind of like recoiling. And I think what you added as well about like, how do you want to take care of yourself if it doesn't go the way you hoped?
Hmm.
And that other piece about like being able to repair things or like in some way just like address things with your therapist that don't feel right. I've had a lot of friends who like have had um like a complaint or an
Hmm.
irritation or like a misalignment with their therapist, but just feel really reluctant to like actually
Hmm.
bring it up. And it's kind of interesting because like you're there to sort of be gaining more confidence and more
Hmm.
self-possession, but that also means like you're in development,
Hmm.
as we always are with these things. So it's hard to like confront the person who's,
Yes.
anyway. Um,
Well, also, I mean, therapy often mimics what's happening in your life outside of
sure,
that.
for
So,
sure.
if you have trouble bringing up things to your therapist, you probably have trouble bringing up to people outside of that. And if you have no problem bringing things up to people outside of therapy, but just to your therapist, that tells you something more about your therapist than about you.
Yeah.
But I also think as therapists, I don't think we were really, I guess it might change now, but, you know, it's still kind of this dynamic of like asking for feedback because it can be
Mm,
really scary to give feedback to your therapist because what
yeah,
if you lose the relationship? What if they get upset? And once again, this is all mimicking things that they've happened outside of their life, you know? But I think most therapists are going to want to offer, like, they're going to want to know. Like, I've never had a client that's given me feedback and I've been like, oh, I really wish I didn't know that. Like it had always been so helpful for me. And also anyone who's and also it is not it is not the client's responsibility to take care of the therapist's feelings.
for sure.
And that's and like if a client says something to me and it does hurt, like it's actually not appropriate for me. Like obviously I want to repair, but it's my responsibility to take that to consultation, to take that to my own therapist, like to do that. And I think that's what's different and maybe sometimes clients don't realize, but it often we feel like unconsciously like we have to take care of our therapist. And it's like, no, go in, talk about tarot. Like, talk about what it needs to you. Like, trust that your therapist has the skills to manage their own emotions, you
Right.
know? Like ideally, that's why they're in this profession.
Yes, ideally. Well, let's talk a little bit about what it's looked like to bring the spiritual, witchy,
Mhm,
magical part of yourself more into your work and into the world.
mhm,
And yeah, this is kind of like
mhm.
that broom closet
Yeah.
question and just speaking to that general, if I think for most people who end up doing living in this kind of way, especially in modern times, we're not getting it from an elder who's like
Mm,
nurtured it throughout our lives. It's usually something we kind of open to or shift toward
mhm,
somewhere in adulthood when
mhm,
the ways that we've been thinking about things start to kind of break down.
mhm,
And so then there's this change in the person where you're really adopting a different kind of perspective and different practices and the way that people, but the people in your life haven't really known you in that way.
mhm,
And so there's often this reluctance to kind of like own it or just to talk about it
mhm,
with other people, to
mhm,
um, bring it into your aesthetics, into your work, into your
mhm.
dinner conversations, like whatever the case may be. So, just a little setup there. But yeah, what's it been like for you? Because when we talked last in the disappeared episode, um, you were sharing about this, but as we got on today, you're telling me we're like in the
Yeah, there's
third
more.
act. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what's it
Yeah.
like?
I'll talk more about my own experience and my own journey around this, which has already kind of been alluded to, what we've spoken to so far. But I think there's, also I'm queer, and so there's a lot of like coming out as queer mimicking like the experience of coming out and being more visible with my spiritual practice as well. And I feel like a theme in this that we've touched upon is sometimes this pressure to divide ourselves and to only have certain parts of us seen. And so in my therapy practice, I was like, well, I can only have this part of me seen, but not the witchy side of me. And even in my copywriting business, which is all very like, I joke about like just about bro marketing and how much online business is like infused with that. There's like people that are in business or like spiritual businesses, and there's like really, you're not allowed to like be in the gray. And so I kind of felt like this spiritual part of me really only got to be seen first individually by me and then slowly introduced with like to my friends and to trusted people. And then, as I mentioned, there just hit these points where just like the universe was like, you can't, like, you've expanded beyond this. Like, you've expanded beyond this. Like, you can't continue on your path without integrating more of this into your full life, without this being visible. And for me, I'm very much someone that likes to test things out on a small scale and gain my confidence and then open things wider and wider. Like I need things to be at a very slow pace. But sometimes folks might feel, I don't know if this is how it was for you, they're just like, let's rip the band-aid off and I'm going to just post it everywhere on all my social and I'm going to send an email to my family. So I think what I want to communicate to folks is there's no right or wrong way, but there also is no pressure to do it a certain way. And so for me, most recently, it's been about, I did have it on my therapy practice website, but now it's also been more in my copywriting business, incorporating more of that. And a big thing of what's prompted that is the rise of AI. And how I feel like, I mean, whatever I say about AI now is going to be outdated in a month because that's the world that we're in. But I feel like, with AI able to do things as a copywriter, it really required me to look at, okay, like, what is it that I actually do as a writer? What is it that I actually
Mm,
do as a creative? And so much of my creative process is instilled in my spiritual practice. And so as I move through this world, being a copywriter and like a messaging strategist, I was like, I can't keep that hidden because now it's really at the forefront and something that really distinguishes me, and even more so in a world of AI, right? So I had one of the things I most did recently is when I launched my tarot readings, I just had this little tiny, tiny, tiny tarot newsletter. Like I said, I like just wanted to try things out and I just wanted like a safe little outlet. And anything that I wrote, and I would write blogs, but anything I wrote, like people would have to find it. It wasn't just out there. And then most recently, and then I have my main like copywriting and marketing newsletter, which I'd like sprinkle in like witchy topics, but I was like, here, if you want the witchy topics, come to this corner. Um, and actually, just this past week, I emailed my tiny little tarot newsletter and I said, actually, this is the last edition for now. I'm going to be integrating this into my main newsletter. And that main newsletter has over 1,000 people on it. And so there's a lot more at stake to do that. But I reached this point where I was just like, I can't hide this anymore. Like, I need to be visible around this. And people are gonna have their opinions about it, and that's okay. Um, and we talked in April. I never would have thought to do that in April. And it just like, goes to show, like, in just a span of a couple months, there is, I think, the more and more you get visible in your spiritual practice, the more and more you are called to integrate it more and more and more in your life. And then I'll give another example. I host like connection events, networking events for therapists. And at the end, like at that, I was like, hey, welcome, blah, blah, blah. If you want to enter to win a tarot reading with me, put your name in here. Right. And they're like, oh, you read tarot, blah, 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 blah. Um, and then the third thing was, and was actually another a way to like practice like safety around this. I was exploring actually having a booth at event for therapists. I was like, this could be exciting. And I like reached out to the person and it would be a mental health thing. And I was like, is tarot going to be the vibe? Like people still think like, I don't know about that. And I reached out to someone else who had been there and they offered me incredible insight. And they said, and I am so grateful that they weren't just like, yeah, do it. They were like, actually, I don't know if it'd be the vibe, right? And so then I get to choose as a tarot to be reader to be like, ooh, do I need to kind of keep things safe and gentle right now? Or am I ready to step into this mental health space and be like, here's my tarot reading booth, bitches. Like, let's do this. So it's all about these different choice points and knowing yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah. I like how you're highlighting those like real life examples of when you're kind of placed at a crossroads and it's like, well, I could do
Mhm.
this or I could do that. And also, as you get the kind of nudge from spirit, the cards, whatever one thinks of like that other realm as containing, um yeah, it's like this feeling in your body, this like pulling
Mhm.
forward, but then you have to figure out yourself, like, how do I enact this in the world, or what does it look like for me to like expand that zone a little bit right now? Um, and it's funny that you mention a booth. I have a similar story. Do you mind if I share?
Yeah, yes.
And I've probably shared this a bit on the podcast and some other episodes, so I'll try to keep it short. But when I was in graduate school for creative writing, I got introduced to this big writers conference, the AWP conference, where there's like 7,000, 10,000 writers or whatever. Once a year, they gather in different cities and there's all these panels and there's like a big book fair. And in the book fair, it's like journals and university programs and publishers, and some other random things. But every time I went to the conference in graduate school or like early in my career working at creative writing nonprofits, like I would go and be part of panels that were about bringing creative writing into like the classroom for younger kids.
Mm.
Um, So all the times that I went then, I usually had some kind of like emotional breakdown at some point during the weekend. And then I stopped going for a few years. And then the tarot thing happened for me. And
Oh,
probably like a couple years after I started typewriter tarot, I was like, what if I bring typewriter tarot to AWP? And
oh
my
wow.
partner at the time had also come from this kind of land, that like they had been to AWP a lot, all of that. And he was like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, do you think, he was kind of questioning it, but I kind of like, I knew how much I suffer at those conferences because you start to really see like, oh, this many other people are trying to do what I'm doing. How do I like break through? Like it just starts to feel really
Hmm.
intimidating, or it
Hmm.
can for a person such as myself. So I was like, I bet this is happening for other people, and I bet they could use a fucking tarot reader while they're there to help them get through the weekend or even beyond that. And so I went for it. And it meant like traveling, to the West Coast, and I'm in Texas and all that. Anyway, uh, the booth was like gangbusters. It was so busy. People loved it. I'm like this weird booth in the middle of this very like books, 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 and more books and more books. And I think that's something that helped me stand out. But then you got to see like all the undercover witches who are writers be like, oh, what's this? But I
There's
was
so
very
many.
nervous about it because I was like, what if all these people I went to graduate school with are like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what is this? So, but and I've been going every year since, and it's been a really nice part of like how the business has grown and like, so
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah. This just goes to show that two things. One, you don't have to go read tarot at a booth to validate your tarot practice and
no,
spiritual
no, no, no.
practice. So for the
Yes.
listeners, like you don't have to do these things.
Yes.
And when you do, it invites people to expand and have permission in other ways. And
Yeah.
even not in tarot ways. I'm thinking of like a tarot reading that I gave a friend that ended up feeling really expansive around her art and her like being an artist.
Mhm.
And so I just think there's something really amazing and magical that happens. But I think also what you're describing and what we get to sit with as spiritual business owners is we have to discern, is this a business decision or a spiritual decision, right? Right?
Mhm.
Like around the booth. Like because like and I personally feel like it should always feel right spiritually before it feels right business wise, because if you're making business decisions that are at odd with your spiritual needs, then you're basically exploiting yourself and also like decreasing self-trust. And so in this case with my booth, I'm like, I have to be on board spiritually in order to make this business decision. Otherwise, it could like be really challenging. But also hearing you, like my business brain is like, oh, like this could be a great way to stand out. And so not everyone is navigating business decisions around their spirituality, but it is a framework to consider.
Yeah, just an example. And I'm glad you emphasized like no one has to like hang up a sign in order to yeah, to sort of move into the world this way. Um yeah, but it's always those, I feel like these are the kinds of moments where we get
Yes.
that little test, like go try,
Yes.
go apply this, like see
Yeah.
what's possible. But that doesn't mean because they arise that we have to take them. And there's probably also different ways to approach them every time.
And I think it could be interesting for folks. I think the threads that in my journey have been like, I just reach a point where I can't ignore a feeling anymore. And that can be like a good sign. And it's really uncomfortable. Like, I hate feeling that way. But when I look back, I'm like, oh, those are really essential moments where, like, I'm so glad I just moved through that. And I'm curious, like with your journey of like being more and more open about your spiritual practice, do you see a theme of like what was nudging you? Or was it like in my case, it was like, oh, I can't ignore this anymore. I'm feeling discomfort, like I'm feeling stuck. Like, was there something for you pattern wise?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, tarot came, I had a deck for a long time, but I didn't know how to use it. And it like
Mm,
I've always been interested in like the unseen. You know, I love like ghost
mhm,
stories as a kid.
mm.
I still love ghost stories now. But but tarot came into my life like a year and like a month or something after I quit drinking. And I
Oh.
had struggled a lot with alcohol and addiction. And so after like a year or so of healing and like really working on, okay, I'm living very differently now, then I also developed this appetite to sort of pass on something because
Mhm,
I had been in a place of like I feel hopeless. Nothing will ever change. My whole life will be kind of shitty inside while I continue to
mhm,
perform the functions of like,
mhm,
normal life. And then when I, addressed a real problem in my life, I was like, oh, actually, it doesn't have to be that way. And I kind of want to let some other people know that or support them with that. And I thought
mhm.
about going back to school to be a therapist, but I was 38. I mean, that shouldn't stop anyone. I have a friend who's like 50 and going to school to be a therapist, and that's awesome. But the student debt was like another thing. And then tarot came, and I was like, oh, this is the
Mhm,
thing. And so I had kind of been set up with this like ache or desire first. Plus, I had
mm,
also already faced this because it's when you tell people you quit drinking, you're also sort of admitting the problem was pretty bad. Not always.
mm,
Sometimes people just like decide to take alcohol out of their lives, but
mhm,
um and so I felt a lot of shame around
mhm,
the drinking, and I'd already sort of like gone through the process of more people seeing that I had
mm,
quit, like I didn't drink anymore. And so that kind of like helped make coming out with tarot easier.
mm.
And I saw it as this tool for like,
Your recovery.
yeah, for my own recovery and also this vector for like being of service in some
Mm,
way. And so that gave it like a bit more of a motivation that was like a bit grander than me.
mhm.
And I love how you're talking about that uncomfortable feeling because I was also I was like, well, now people are gonna think she's this cliche, like I quit drinking, I found spirit, I found God, and like now I'm like a totally different person, and people are like, what the fuck? But it wasn't. I mean, maybe people
Mhm.
thought that, but they didn't say it. Um,
I actually have a way to, actually, this is so beautiful that you shared this, and this could probably be its own podcast around spirituality, addictive processes, and tarot,
yeah,
because I didn't say this, but I was initially in therapy in my 20s because for an eating disorder, which, so that's how my addictive process looked like. Which now with IFS, I see eating disorders very differently, and
Mhm.
also addictive processes very differently. And that's why I'm saying addictive
Interesting.
processes and not addiction. Um,
I like that.
because that's my framework for understanding it. But there is something that with like my eating disorder recovery has been intricately tied to my tarot practice. And I find that I can't deepen in my tarot practice without deepening in my recovery.
Mhm.
And they help each other out. And I feel like there's something about tarot and, coming out of, also coming out as queer was a big part of my recovery process. But there is something around like, maybe there is something around these addictive processes that are numbing us and keeping us small and protecting us. And then when you stop doing that, you get to see, like, okay, what is life? How do I want engaged in life? And I don't drink. I am actually allergic to it.
Kind of
But I
great.
also stopped drinking because I felt like it was really, and this, I was like, oh my God, I was like 25. I was like, didn't even know this, but I was just like, I just feel like it's hurting me spiritually to drink, you
Oh,
know?
beautiful. Amazing.
And then, but no, I didn't stop drinking until I was 30.
Okay.
But yeah, but then I'd always get really sick, and then I found out I was allergic to it. And so that made it easy. So I don't tell people. So I do think there's something here about the ways that we feel like we have to mute ourselves and numb ourselves. And as you open up more and more to tarot, you're going to be confronted with the ways that you keep yourself small and the ways that you protect yourself. And one of those ways might be drinking, and it might be substances, or it might be, disordered behavior around eating, which just to plug, if anyone, like, I love Abby Atwood's podcast, the Full Plate podcast, if you want really balanced, that's not even the right word. If you want really decolonized, expansive approach to disordered eating. So highly recommended that if people are resonating with that, that's a good source for that.
Yeah, thank you for that resource. Yeah, it's that we probably could go way deeper
Yeah.
there. And I think too, like the for me, the alcohol, the addictive process, I like this term, um, I think had a lot to do with not having a spiritual foundation and that I was seeking in alcohol a number of things, but um and one of them is like the numbing and escape, but I think another one was like this search for some kind of like transcendence or um like sometimes this feels tender to reveal. I don't know why, but like sometimes if I was like drinking at home alone, I really like to sit outside and just like look at the trees and like
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
sort of be with nature. And I think that was like a spiritual kind of impulse that I
Mhm.
was trying to sort of like heighten through the feelings
Mhm.
that alcohol give you. But there's, I mean,
Yep.
it's all empty. Like there's nothing really there, you know? Um, if that
But
makes sense.
it's what you had access to. Like what you're describing is like an altered state,
Yeah, and it
right?
was like modeled for me so much, particularly
Hmm.
by the men in my family, plus the
Hmm.
genetics to the extent that that influences it. But yeah, it was just sort of like this, it's so easy to get,
Hmm.
and it's like
Hmm.
very acceptable to
Hmm.
partake kind of whenever
Hmm.
you want. So,
Yeah. Tarot can be maybe along this lines if people are resonating with this, like tarot can be I mean, this would be where, I mean, I think addictive processes are protective parts, right?
yeah,
Um, but also I'm hearing there was a spiritual part of you that was like really craving some kind of expression as well. And so that's why it's like I think we're, you know, going back to the idea of like working with a therapist, it's like this is why I love IFS is because it is a model that is enough to hold the spiritual side of things, but it's also non-pathologizing. And
yeah,
so that is that is something for folks to consider when they are seeking out therapy, when they are wanting to use tarot in therapy, because you know, tarot, I can't really see it. Me personally, I can't see using it in a pathologizing way. Like I just see it as like a strength and a tool and like expansion. But there's so much here. Like I knew we were gonna dive into some juicy stuff today. We were gonna go deep.
should we pull a card?
Yeah.
Take a
I actually
little
pulled a
tarot
card
break.
before we got
Oh, okay,
on,
you
and
go
I did get
first.
the Three of Cups. I'm gonna pull again though.
Okay.
Yeah, I did get the Three of Cups, which was like, we're just gonna like raise our cup and talk about what's happening. Are we asking a question or are we just pulling a card?
Um, I'm just gonna pull one, but if you want to ask a question, I support that fully.
I'll just pull it. Oh, I got the Lovers. What did you get?
I got the Ten of Wands.
Oh, ooh, what deck is that? I'll show mine has, oh, oops, I'm using the This Might Hurt tarot.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I have the
Ten of Wands.
many queens tarot.
Ooh, what do you make of the Ten of Wands?
Well, on one level, I'm like, this is us trying to squeeze a lot of topics into a conversation. This card shows a sort of femme figure who's only wearing pants and high heels, or like kind of a heeled boot, crouching, shown, we're like looking from the back, and then with their arms raised, they're holding these 10 different wands that all have a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of point on the end, like a
Mm-hmm.
decorative point. So that's one thing it made me think. And then, given what we've been talking about, this also makes me think of like a person trying to manage their parts
Mm-hmm.
on their own, like not, it's like I've got all these sides of me and I've got to kind of like juggle them and like hold them together, or
Mm-hmm.
like hide two of them while the other eight are visible. And it's just a lot
Yeah.
of energetic labor as you consciously or unconsciously like run those calculations and try to like ca- segregate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one thing that this was true too with drinking, because I always had to think about like, when am I going to drink again? How much am I going to drink? When am I going to try to stop drinking? Like, how many drinks? And it's just like my mind was focused on it way too much. And like that was energy
Mm-hmm.
that was just like
Mm-hmm.
draining off into a void, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this kind of makes me think of those things.
I like that. I like that. With the lovers, I always see the lover. Well, one, it's associated with Gemini, and so I'm like,
Yes.
nod to the Gemini.
Yes.
I think of it as values, and so I can see it as an invitation for folks listening that if they are feeling like juggling or they are thinking about how to navigate being more open with their spiritual practice, to maybe start with their values. And if they, there are values exercises you can Google and find and like cut, you can, if you're, you can cut out cards and have all your values. But having something that gets to anchor you during the process, because as we've described in our process, there is going to be things that you butt up against and that are going to be scary, intimidating, like rejecting. Um, and then the other thing I was thinking about is along this line of recovery, and also just in general and being more open spiritually, we live in a world um, that that really wants us to hate ourselves.
Yeah.
If you just look at advertisements,
Yeah.
right? If you just look like, and especially wants us to hate ourselves as like spiritual witchy people, you know? Anything against like the dominant narrative around how we do that. And so I feel like in a way this card was where the way I'm feeling it is like just loving a sliver of yourself and a sliver of your spiritual practice like is enough. There's a lot working against us, like we didn't develop these feelings and these fears in a vacuum, and there are real challenges and safety concerns to navigate.
Yes. That's making me kind of see the cards together like
Hmm.
this invitation to step into values and practice more self-love and acceptance of more parts of you. And the Ten of Wands is kind of like, it's hard work in this world where you're constantly being nudged to turn against yourself and deny yourself and do things you don't really want to do or that you don't really care about. or to be someone that you're not.
Yeah. There might be, I maybe we can invite listeners, like if they have a tarot deck next to them, to pull a card, and one's like, what is a value that can be guided for your spiritual journey, your spiritual process, and maybe how can you release the burdens that you're carrying around this too? Um, and that can be like a further extension of these two cards that we're drawing.
I love that. So one card for a value that wants to be
Hmm.
embraced or activated,
Or
and then
embodied. Hmm.
yeah, and then a second card for what may be standing in the way or what could be released. Is that
Yeah,
right?
released,
Okay.
unburdened,
Unburdened. I
composted,
like that. Yes.
transmuted. Yeah, that's an IFS term. So whenever I see the
Right.
10 of Wands, I think of burdens.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull this right now and just see how this works. Oh, this is
I'll
funny.
do
Just
one
as an
too.
example, I pulled the strength card for the value and then the five of pentacles as the the thing to unburden. So if this was someone's spread that they got, um, in my case, if I was reading this, I'd be like, the strength is like a reminder that the hard stuff is worth it. It might be tender, going at a gentle pace. And then the Five of Pentacles is like, I personally associate that a lot with scarcity. And like, I won't have enough. And so it feels like an invitation from spirit of like, don't like examine this belief that if XYZ, there won't be enough. Like if I don't do this tarot booth, I'll never get any business. Or if I don't do this. So that'd be an example. I just wanted to feel out that reading and see if it actually worked. And it does.
It does. Yeah, it worked for me
Yeah.
too. I got the
What'd you
knight,
get?
I got the Knight of Cups, like
Ooh,
writing for values, like wanting to
yeah.
go out in the world, follow my heart, serve in the way that I feel called to serve. It's got a
Mhm.
really like fun horse, a really strong, fun horse. And then the unburdening was the Five of Cups, this like sadness. I definitely grapple with that, like everything that's changing politically and
Mhm.
environmentally. It's just
Mhm.
uh like it's so much to
Mhm.
process and there's so much to be upset and sad about, and
Mhm.
my heart feels really heavy, so it's like this,
Mhm.
carrying your heart forward lightly in the Knight of
Mhm.
Cups, but also yeah, it's hard. It's hard when your heart feels heavy.
Yes, yes. And like I feel like with Five of Cups, that was a cup that was a theme for us last time that we
Yes.
met. We were like in
Yes.
like another thread. Um I what I will say about the Knight of Cups, see if it resonates for you, is it's like the person is moving forward and holding their cups steady. So I often think
Mhm.
about that for the Knight of Cups is like the value is like, even though there's like turbulent things around me, even though I'm moving, maybe I'm going on unsteady ground, I'm going to keep this cup steady. And that I feel is very much like you. Like I get that vibe from you. You're just like, yes, there's going to be a lot going on, but I'm going to keep that cup steady and my value steady and like where I'm going steady. Does that resonate at all?
I love that. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. I can I think steadiness is something I can achieve as a like triple Capricorn Taurus rising. So um yeah,
You're
it's
a triple
definitely
cap.
yeah,
Oh,
I was
wow.
Sun, Moon, and Mars there, and then my rising is Taurus. But
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. So you're all Earth. I'm a Gemini sun, moon, and then a Libra rising.
oh, all air, yes.
Yes. But then I have a bunch of water in the rest of my chart.
Nice.
Um, yeah. Yes. So yeah, I think you can stay steady. You can stay
You could try.
stay the course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had a couple little things listed as well. I
Mhm.
think we've been talking maybe for about an hour. Is there something that feels you want to go to next?
Hmm.
we had talked about, or I mean, we can also do another episode one day and dork out about these things too.
It feels like, honestly, it feels like this is a very well-rounded episode and it
Okay.
feels pretty good and complete. And I think if we were to open up another topic, it would feel rushed and like we couldn't do it justice and go as deep as we do. And I think we've given the listeners a lot to think about
Yes.
and
Yes.
process.
Yes. We're on a steady ground, perhaps, to conclude. Um, well, Ariana, I would love to come. I mean, now that we've like spoken twice, I'd love to have you come back on the show
Yeah.
in the future and explore other things. It's just so nice to have kind of like a tarot pal
Hmm.
to compare practices and compare our understanding of the cards. But as we finish up, what would you like to invite folks to do with you?
Hmm. Well, if they are business owners, therapists, healers, space holders, I have my newsletter, The Weekly Wordsmith, which I am toying with changing to the Weekly Word Witch, as I integrate more of my intuitive spiritual side into that. But who knows? We'll see what's happened. So if you are a business owner, you're welcome to join my newsletter. That's on my website. Um, and that's the main way to keep in touch with me, ariannasmith.com. And if they're in Colorado and they need a witchy therapist, they also know where to find me too.
Beautiful. I'll share links for all these things in the
Mhm.
notes. And so good to be with you again. Thank you for being
Likewise.
here.
Likewise. Thank you.